Hello and welcome to the winter webinar series, the third one in this series. Really excited to have you on board today. Just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners on the many lands on which we're meeting today and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So our guest at this time is an Order of Australia Award winner for outstanding service to sport after representing Australia in 3 Paralympic Games and 3 IPC World Athletic Championships in long distance running and paratriathlon in Tokyo 2022 and Commonwealth Games in 2022 in triathlon as well. He's climbed to 8,300 meters on the tallest peak in the world, Mount Everest, and co-piloted an ultra-light motor glider around Queensland on 3 occasions to raise money for charity. He's currently deep in preparation to become the first totally blind person to swim the English Channel. Even appeared as a participant on the Australian edition of Dancing with the Stars back in 2009. He's been awarded the Fervent Global Love of Lives Medal, or the Nobel of Life, and the Melvin Jones Fellowship for Humanitarian Service, and sat on the board for international and national sporting, tourism, and disability organisations. In his spare time, he supports and fundraises for many worthwhile causes and is the founder and manager of his own business, Chocolate Moments, where he makes the best chocolate creations in Brisbane. Gerrard Gosens, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Jordan.
Hopefully you're not blushing too much after that, but that is quite a list of achievements. Now, I don't normally start with this question, but for the purpose of our audience, when did you lose your sight?
I was born totally blind, so I was born with aniridia and glaucoma. So obviously it was, I suppose very unusual back then for a person to actually be tested for glaucoma as a young kid. Yeah. And that's where the damage was done as, from a baby. So yes, I was totally blind from birth.
Okay. So you kind of grew up without sight. How would you describe your upbringing and schooling?
I think for me it was about breaking down many of the various perceptions. I grew up in the bush, and there was very limited, I suppose, support. Whether you talk about the visiting teachers or I suppose the teacher aides. So it was about working with my fellow peers, and then when I moved to Central Queensland at Yeppoon, and thankfully was the first person to ever go to high school with a guide dog. That was, I suppose, a great opportunity again to break down some of the perceptions, and then also challenge the status quo on obviously what could be achieved out there on the sporting arena as well as within the classroom. And thankfully, as technology progressed, I went from the guy forbidden manual typewriter through to I suppose some form of a laptop, if you would call it. It was sort of a very basic computer, and then onwards to university.
Yeah. So during that time, you said you grew up in the bush. Did you encounter many other blind people, or did you go looking for role models?
No,
for me, it was
no. I think for me back then there's very limited, I suppose, communication. There wasn't the mobile phones. There wasn't the Facebook. There wasn't the, I suppose, the communication between the supports within schools. And I think my parents were had a very simplistic view about get out there, give it a go, and see how far you actually get. And for me, it was there was the trials, the tribulations, there was the falls, the bumps, the knocks, the bruises, the cuts. And for me, thankfully, I developed, I suppose, a good network of friends, and sport played a very big part in that, and developed not only that relationship with out there on the sporting arena, but also within the classroom. So that's where that, I suppose, network of friends was a massive, I suppose, teamwork, not only achieving what was on the sporting arena, but also within the classroom.
Yeah, definitely. And look, school's often seen as like a first step in one's career trajectory. Did it kind of feel like that for you, or are you kind of just finding your way?
Oh, no, I think for me it was, it was about obviously the processes that were, as each year went by, and obviously the various challenges that came with the increased study, or the, I suppose, access to communication, would be through textbooks. So there was very limited audio books. There was very limited, I suppose, range of technology. So for me, that's where the basics were. Finding those friends who were prepared to work with you on those particular moments.
Yeah, and did you want to be an elite sportsman sort of growing up, or was it something else that you had in mind that you wanted to be?
Oh, another thing for me, it was I love sport. There were whether it be the AFL, the cricket, the running, the whatever I could sort of play my hand at. And there were many times within the school grounds that I challenged the perceptions of both the teachers and my
Yeah,
fellow peers, whether it be getting out there and practicing, playing cricket. And that was playing with a real cricket ball.
yeah,
It was, uh, and would it be from the athletics, or would it be finding a guide runner or finding someone to run with over the weekend, or more later in life, obviously jumping on a tandem bike. So for me, it was about the journey. There was no actual bucket list. It was about the
yeah,
opportunities
yeah,
that were presented to me.
yeah, yeah. So some of our other guests has also spoken about being sort of guided in a direction of certain careers due to stigma. It sounds a little bit like this may have been the case with you, but you've kind of pushed past that.
Oh no, I think for me, my parents, my particularly my father, obviously wanted me to be involved in our business, which we had back then, which was mechanical engineering.
Yeah,
Um, but I think for me, it was that thirst for sport, and that's where obviously I sort of, when living in central Queensland, I was then engaged as before I even sort of left high school. I was working for guide dogs as a regional manager, and
yeah,
that came through sport. And then I began the Paralympic committee. So back in the early years, I saw the need to establish the Paralympic committee. So took the challenge, took I suppose the risk, and began the Paralympic committee in Queensland from the back bedroom with the good old laptop,
yeah, yeah,
computer, and bubble jet printer. And 10 years on as a CEO, I think we achieved some amazing things and lead up to 1996 Paralympic Games, and also Sydney 2000, where Australia topped the medal tally.
yeah, definitely. And it sounds a little bit like sport was not only an outlet for you, but a career choice in many ways. It seems to have led to a number of different careers too.
I think for me also too was seeing the I suppose the opportunity to make a difference. And back then, obviously, there was no real support for Paralympic athletes.
Yeah,
And back, if you think about 1992 Barcelona Games, the team took out a loan to get to Barcelona, and I was absolutely, I suppose, astonished by that particular result, and saw to never see that happen again,
yeah,
which we did so in '96, and then onwards to Sydney 2000, where there was probably, if you look back on history, there's a few people who, by their own misfortune, helped us along the way, and people like Arthur Tunstall, who
yeah,
at the 1994 Commonwealth Games said that Paralympic athletes shouldn't be seen, and that made the front page of almost every paper in the world. And
yeah,
that changed people's perceptions of Paralympic athletes, and saw the need to support them. So there were people like Arthur who, through his misperceived, I suppose, comments, really changed the history for Paralympic athletes.
yeah, yeah. You would have seen so much during that time. Um,
Oh, massively, not only from a state and federal funding perspective. Like back then, the Paralympic Committee, we were receiving pittance in comparison to both, Olympic and other sports. And we're still on that journey to have equity in funding from both Olympic and Paralympic Games. But I'll tell
yeah,
you what, we've made some huge steps along that journey.
yeah, definitely. So it sounds like you obviously played a lot of sports growing up. What made you choose running as your initial sport to compete in?
I think the freedom of running, and also the way that teamwork, whether it be through long distance running. When I ran from Cairns to Brisbane 5 times, I had a dream as a young kid to, back in those days, there was a run called the Sydney to Melbourne Westfield Run, the days of Ian Oscuris and Cliff Young, the potato picker.
Yeah,
Um, and I was doing, I suppose, the major runs in central Queensland, and was lucky enough to do a run with the Army, and they invited me to run with them. And then from there, sort of, I suppose, grew an idea of running from Cairns to Brisbane, which we did, 5 times. And I had the dream to to compete in the Sydney to Melbourne Westfield Run. I was prepared both mentally and physically. The year that I entered the Sydney to Melbourne Westfield Run, with my team, my equipment, everything at hand, they cancelled the Sydney to Melbourne Westfield Run. And not only did they cancel it, it was never to be held again.
Yeah.
So that journey of that goal was somewhat, I suppose, taken from me. And from there, obviously, moved my hand to Paralympic sports, and that's where running for Australia at 5:10 marathon came about.
And what was your training regime looking like at that particular point in time? Was it a full-time sort of gig, or was it something you just sort of
Oh,
eased in over time? Or
no, I was working full time and training both morning and night. So I've never required I suppose a lot of sleep. So it's and because I was studying university when I was running from Cairns to Brisbane and working full time, I sort of was up at, well, even these days it's actually even worse. For example, preparing for the English Channel, I'm at the pool at 3 a.m. So up at 2:30, the pool by 3, in the pool for 2.5 odd hours, and then on to work as running my my business as a chocolatier. I have 2 cafes in Brisbane.
yeah. So fast forwarding, obviously you've done all your preparation to prepare for the Paralympics. Fast forwarding to your first one, walking around the stadium at the opening ceremony. What was that sort of like? What were your emotions going through at that point?
I often say to people that you don't walk into the opening ceremony. In actual fact, you float, picked up by the sheer splendor of the 80,000 people, and you float that entire lap.
Yeah.
So it is. There's no more amazing experience and going in there as a working behind the scenes as I suppose as a CEO within Queensland, and then obviously as an athlete that was quite an honour, and more so Sydney 2000. To walk into a homegrown, stadium, to have the support and to compete in the marathon, to run across the Sydney Harbour and through the streets of Brisbane, through the streets of Sydney in the marathon was a whole bloody awesome experience.
Yeah, I can imagine. Incredible. Did you find it difficult to focus on your comp at hand after such a high, though? Do you find it tough to kind of
Oh,
refocus and go, yep, okay, I've got my event in a couple of days. Now it's time. I've just got to put my head down again.
I know. I think for me, because I had the 5 to 10 the marathon, so it was all the way through the games where it was switch on for the 5,000 meters, switch on for the 10K, and then prepare for the marathon. So it was a big list of events, obviously for Paralympic Games, more so Sydney. But perhaps my biggest mistake on Sydney 2000 was that I walked into the event perhaps fatigued, in the sense that because I've been working behind the scenes preparing, both working with SOCOG, the Sydney Organising Committee, as
Yeah.
well as working obviously the preparation of the Paralympic team, the supports that go behind it. So unbeknownst to me, I probably walked in there more fatigued than I should have been. I should have perhaps pulled myself away a few weeks prior, well rested, whereas I was sort of working up to the last minute, making sure that, if you look back at Sydney 2000, there was still a lot of misconceptions that had to be changed.
Yeah.
And I think we achieved a lot. And again, Australia topped the medal tally in Sydney 2000, which was an amazing achievement. When you have to consider our geographical location in the world and the cost that it takes for a Paralympic athlete to compete, not just here in Australia, but also around the world, but also then the training costs, where it be for a person who's blind or has low vision, even just getting a taxi to the swimming pool, you're looking at some costs there and getting back. You're looking at the training costs, obviously having a sighted guide with you, potentially if you're traveling overseas. So there's some considerable costs for any Paralympic athlete.
Yeah, and a lot of people I speak to consider, or obviously because I'm Australian, that kind of ties into it. But Sydney was considered one of the most successful sporting events this country had ever seen. Sydney 2000. Did you find there was a greater sense of pressure or expectation associated with it being on home soil?
Oh, look, I think there's going to be, not only just, I think from a Paralympic Sydney 2000, but also if you look at, the more recent Gold Coast Commonwealth Games. But I think what was really special for our athletes is that more people attended as spectators the Paralympic Games than they did the Olympic Games.
Yeah.
So from a spectator perspective, more people came to watch it. than the Olympic Games, and that was pretty special. And again, the volunteers were huge support in that, as well as obviously the change and I suppose awareness about the need for access to transport, access to training facilities, access to more financial support, because it came with it that recognition that, hey, look, these athletes are elite international athletes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So a lot of the time when we talk about long distance running in general, the terminology is determination, strength of conviction, never say die attitude, often attributed to that sport. Especially when hitting the wall for the first time, or as runners will say, have you sort of hit the wall on any
Sure.
runs in the past, and how did you
Sure.
sort of become it?
Yeah, I think for me, I probably hit the wall more in training rather than the actual competition, the elite races. But I think I've seen the best athletes in the world, both able and athletes with a disability, have some real shockers. They may be elite athletes, and I've seen guys who run 2 hours 10 for a marathon,
Yeah.
Olympic athletes, and they've turned up on the day and just had shockers. And it's just sometimes physiologically the body doesn't do it. And again, I was talking to one of my I suppose advisors / mentors, Linton Mortensen. He's done the 7 oceans of the world as in swimming perspective, the Triple Crown. He's more recently done both ice miles, both in Antarctica and the Arctic Circle.
Yeah.
So that's where you swim a mile at 1 degree of temperature.
Yeah.
This guy weighs upwards of 150 kilos, is about 6'6", and he said to me last week, he said, Gerrard, I was in Adelaide and he was having a shower in the hotel, a cold shower. He struggled.
Yeah.
And just those days where your body says, no, I'm not doing it. And that's what happened to him.
Yeah. I imagine dealing with that as well, though, has sort of brought you a lot of things that you've sort of been able to, a lot of sort of attributes that you've been able to put towards other aspects of your life as well. Would you say that's, attributed to a lot of the sort of challenges that you've taken on over the years?
Oh, look, for me, I've never had I suppose, a bucket list as such, whether it be, climbing Everest, or even, for example, when I was invited to do Dancing with the Stars, there were some huge challenges there, because when people say to you, hey, listen, we're doing the rumba, we want a really sexy look. Well, what's a sexy look? I've never seen a sexy look. Or,
Yeah.
we're doing the tango, we want a really passionate look. Well, what's a passionate look? And what I didn't realize about the show was back then was it was a live band. So you've got live music playing right on top of you, which takes away your hearing respectively. And then you've got 3 cameras that follow you around the floor. So I would never admit to being a good dancer. We just told a good story. And the story we told about was not just the preparation in the actual dance, but also how we completed it. We also threw in, we saw what our strengths were, and my strengths were that I was able to lift Jessica and we were able to throw her around. So we took advantage of those lifts to make them look pretty spectacular and to hide the bad dancing. But we made it to the final, and that was purely because of the story we told along that journey. And it's whether it be Dancing with the Stars, or running from Cairns to Brisbane, or this channel, or even my business as a chocolatier. They've all been learned lessons along that way. And more so, perhaps more importantly, has been the teamwork, that communication with the teamwork. And each of my team had very different characteristics, also strengths and weaknesses. And for example, when I take my 6 swim guides across to the UK to swim the English Channel, I've got them layered in the sense of their physical strengths, as well as obviously their mental capacity to endure the cold. So they know where they're swimming, they know their swim order, and they know why their swim order is like that. Because to get across a channel, there are 4 quadrants, and each of those quadrants can be pretty severe. So in the history of the English Channel, since 1853 to now, so basically 170 years, there's been less than 2,000 people who swim the English Channel. But in the history of Everest, since 1953 to now, which is only 70 years, so 100 years less than the Channel, there's been over 7,000 people climb Everest. So Everest, in actual fact, is actually 3 times easier to do than what swimming the English Channel is.
Incredible. So you mentioned obviously Everest. These sort of opportunities that come up to you, like did you go seeking these, or did people,
No,
you know,
no, no. I
suggest
was,
it?
I was, I was, I was working at a function and event, and I was offered the opportunity to go to Everest, and took it on board. As the same with Dancing with the Stars. It wasn't something I went hunting. It was a person rang me on the phone and said, "Hey, listen, we're thinking about doing this. Would you like to come down and we'll see how it works?" And sure, let's give it a go. Same with the English Channel. It wasn't something I had on my bucket list. There was a person who presented me the chance to, "Hey, listen, there's never been a totally blind person swim the channel in history of it. How about giving it a go?" So there have all been opportunities, not something that I must do that. And for me, it's about raising funds for those charities. For example, with the Swim Across the English Channel, we're raising money for Great Dreams, which provides funding for young kids, whether it be through sport or theatre or through music.
Yeah. So with Everest, was that something you would have had to have done a fair bit of preparation though for that,
Yeah.
something like that? How did you prepare for something like that?
So thankfully, through my connection with I suppose the actual, we call them the crampons. There was a lot of work on ladders, so making sure you actually had the fit of the cameras straight through the actual crampons on the actual ladders. So there's a lot of practice on that.
Yeah.
There's a climbing facility over in Brisbane at the Gap, so there's some high wires over there. There was a lot of indoor climbing, and I think also, which should be perhaps put out there, publicised more now, more so amongst the people who have low vision or blind, is that indoor climbing has now been added to the 28th Los Angeles Paralympic Games, indoor climbing.
Yeah.
And that's a great VI sport, because there's B1, B2, B3 categories at the Paralympic Games for indoor climbing. But going back to that training, it was 2 years of preparation. I had a lot of relationships with climbers, both from mountaineering perspective as well as indoor. And spent a lot of hours on the walls, and also obviously the working on the crampons on the ice ladders.
Yeah. So climbing Everest, can you tell us something about Everest that only people who have attempted to climb it would know?
I think the biggest challenge about Everest for a person who's blind or has low vision is back then it was the isolation, in the sense that you go into your tents probably around about sort of 7, 8 o'clock to escape the -20, and you're in there in your sleeping bag, and you've got inside your sleeping bag, you've got your toothpaste and your batteries, and you basically sleeping bags almost like your insulation to save battery life.
Yeah.
Back then, there was a person whose sighted can actually pick up a book and read a book, or have a game of solitaire with their cards, whereas back then there wasn't the battery life as there is today to do that sort of stuff. So the isolation was, and your body wakes up at about 1 or 2 in the morning because of the lack of oxygen. So you from 2 till about sort of 6, you're sitting there listening to the ice fall. You're listening to the change in pressure amongst the ice, because that's the most dangerous time when ice or when avalanches actually can occur.
Yeah.
My most valuable piece of equipment on Everest cost me $5. And for example, my boots were $8,000, my down jacket, the whole, I suppose, the equipment list was in its thousands. But the most valuable piece of equipment was $5. And that $5 was a yak bell, which I purchased.
Yeah.
I put on one of my fellow climbers' backpacks. It saved their voice. It saved my voice. It was consistent, reliable communication. And that's where that piece of communication, as we were climbing, up Everest, was priceless.
So with that sort of barren environment going on outside your tent, was it difficult to switch off? Was there any fear associated with just you're in a tent with everything that could be going on out on the outside of that? Was that difficult to switch off, or did you get into a routine?
There was one occasion where I had a rope which was from my tent to the taller tent. And there was one night when I actually used that bit of rope to go to the taller tent, and then there was a major ice fall that happened while I was in the toilet, and I came out, and that rope was actually under the ice or under the snow.
Oh.
So I tried to find my way back to the tent, and I was out there for over an hour, purely because obviously I lost the rope and my team couldn't hear me because of the wind.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was pretty, I suppose, a pretty scary moment, not
Yeah.
knowing that perhaps with any step I actually could step into a crevasse.
Yeah. Yeah. So returning from Everest, did you return in good health for your next challenge, or did it take some time to sort of build up to taking on more challenges after that?
I came back. I came back and went straight back into running and went to the IPC Athletic Sport Championships in Europe and Netherlands. So it was I had the fitness there, obviously from climbing, but went back to the athletics perspective, and then
Yeah.
obviously went on to Beijing 2008, competing for Australia there in Beijing, which was amazing experience in the sense that in the final of the 1500, it was 87,000 people, and the crowd was that loud. I actually couldn't hear my guide runner who was right beside me. That's
Yeah.
how loud the crowd were. But again, there was a great chance, particularly in China, to break down the perceptions or the provide opportunities for people in China who had a disability.
Yeah, and look, they also took a rather large step as well in sort of having a band perform at the opening ceremony that were completely blind and low vision as well. So they yeah, quite an interesting games, that's for sure. Must have been incredible to be a part
Oh,
of.
I think obviously as we move forward, I think from Beijing now to the 2024 Paris Paralympic Games, there's going to be some amazing things there happen. And moving on to LA, that's the first time there's been an addition of a Paralympic sport with indoor climbing. And come 2032, to have the Paralympic Games here in Brisbane
Yeah.
is going to be absolutely mind blowing in the sense of the opportunities for athletes, but also for I think also when we recognise the team that surrounds a Paralympic athlete, whether it be the guide runners, whether it be the coaches, whether it be the officials, because right now, I think there's a great opportunity to increase that opportunity, and whether it be the support staff, the escorts, the guide runners, and also the appreciation of what, for example, people don't realise that a tandem bike is a competition tandem bike is upwards of $20,000-$25,000,
Yeah.
and people don't recognise that expense. And there are at times some of the barriers for people to compete at elite sport. Sure, you can go pick up a tandem for a few $1,000s, but there's still some major barriers financially for any athlete looking just to simply do sport and recreation.
Yeah. And yeah, many learnings to come. So we're just at the halfway point of the webinar here. So I'll just once again remind people that if they do want to ask a question and they are using a screen reader, the keystroke is Alt H to bring up the chat window and then type your question in. As I said, we're at the halfway point of this webinar. So if you are looking to get those questions in, get them in now before we run out of time, I guess. Moving on from that, obviously you spoke a bit about taking a completely different direction in Dancing with the Stars, and that was just kind of pitched to you. You said as well that it was an incredible challenge. With that challenge, did you learn anything in particular about yourself?
I did in the sense of obviously what I needed to do from an expressive perspective, because I never knew that there was so much expression that was put into dance,
Yeah.
as well as the way that I can't obviously show you now, but the way that hand is held when you actually do a dance maneuver or particular pose, as well as obviously the way the spins that are, or the way the particular foot is held in a particular dance, or the cha-cha-cha or the salsa, or there was many things learned through that perspective, but also then how to, for example, when doing spins on the dance floor, you had to invent, I suppose, ways of making sure that, for example, a person is sighted, when they do a spin, they can make sure they're facing the front.
Yeah.
So there was a risk when I was doing the spins on the dance floor that I would then have my back to the audience once I'd actually put Jessica down. So
Yeah.
there were cues, or those things I had to use in the environment to know where I was on the dance floor. And perhaps the scariest moment of the whole series was when I had to dance for 20 seconds entirely on my own. Now, 20 seconds may not sound like a long time, but for example, Dancing with the Stars to this day is actually pre-recorded. back when I was doing it, it was a live broadcast.
Right.
So any mistake was real, live, and happening then.
Yeah.
So for 20 seconds, I had to dance entirely on my own, and my dance partner had to leave the floor. So I had to make sure that I obviously wasn't going to run off the stage or run into the cameras or follow you around the floor. So there was some major things which I had to take into consideration of what I was going to do to make sure that A, I kept facing the front, and B, that's obviously when my dance partner rejoined me on the dance floor, I was actually in the right position. So, and again, being a live band, it's taking away your hearing. So that impedes so many different things on the dance floor. And that's why, obviously, if a person who's blind and has low vision, is going to struggle in a very loud environment, whether it be a nightclub or a loud function room, because they're so dependent on the hearing to provide that auditory feedback.
And were the producers of the show concerned about that, or was that something that you kind of brushed over and went, yeah, it'll be fine, sort of thing?
I think I have to go down to when they first spoke to me. They said, "Hey, listen, come down to Sydney. We'll give it a trial. As in, we'll get your dance partner in. We'll film it. We'll send it back because the actual show is owned by a company in the UK called Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah,
and they obviously didn't want to make sure that I was a complete, I suppose, blitz at it. So I went down there and had to learn a song within the space of an hour. And put it to tape and send it back to the UK to make sure, hey, listen, this was going to work, and which it did. And then, but however, what they didn't tell me at the time, as I said, was a live band. So when I got there, on my very first rehearsal, I wasn't aware that around the circumference of the floor, there was lights that stood out. And they stuck out about probably 5 centimetres from the edge of the floor.
right.
And I smashed 3 lights on my first rehearsal. And I thought, well, this is going to be a pretty short series. But again, I learned from that, obviously, that where I had to step and stand. And then it was about obviously making sure that the lifts that I did and the throws that we did throughout the series were going to be in a place where I knew that if something went wrong, I could correct it very easily. But again, it was a lot of hard work. Like we trained day in, day out. And it got to the end of the series where we were doing 5 dances on the one night in the series when it got to the final. So it was a lot of work to put into that week to not only memorize the steps, but also make sure that we were on the floor was going to be in a good position for both the cameras as well as the actual live band.
And that you're engaging different muscle groups as well. I imagine that would be something that you probably had to adjust to as well. I mean, you were still competing as a long distance runner.
Yeah. It's a very different muscle because obviously upper body strength had to be there to lift Jessica. And also holding her in a particular pose for a certain time, and also the agility to have, or the flexibility to then obviously, I suppose, put in particular positions, and then also the different stretches that required the flexibility for, whether it be the waltz or the quick step or the cha-cha-cha. So there was, and to tell you what, for any dancer, they are extremely fit. They go through some incredible rehearsals, and you can see why not only they're fit, but as an athlete, they also consume a fair whack of food because of obviously their continual movement as well.
Yeah. And when you sort of decided to, well, I mean, you obviously didn't retire from competitive sport, but you decided to take a break from long distance running, and there was a bit of a gap between that and you taking on triathlon.
Yeah.
Did you, like we often hear about sort of athletes finding it quite difficult to move into mainstream life without sport. Did you find that difficult?
I think for me, I went to the 2013 Marathon World Championships in London, and from there it was more about sort of progressing on. And I was actually just doing a training session at the pool, just doing a recovery swim after a bit of a run, and I hated swimming because I was a runner. Yeah. So I was just doing the arbitrary sort of going to a sort of 1K swim, which for me back then was major because I thought 1 kilometer was just so far. And I got talking to a guy at the end of the lane rope, and he said to me, "Oh, you've ever done a triathlon?" I said, "No, mate, never done a triathlon because it wasn't my sort of thing."
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, I'm prepared to give it a go." And that led on to obviously then competing for Australia at World Championships and the 2022 Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, and obviously starting your own business around that time as well, often considered a bit of a stereotypically considered out of bounds for people that are blind or low vision, like commercial kitchens and things like that, sharp knives, hot pans, machines, not to mention the noise, which you've already spoken about.
Jordan, I think I would, like, for example, when I began Chocolate Moments back in 2011, I never thought, for example, and I still do it today, I actually still do, chocolate cooking classes where I teach people how to cook. And, every single person in those sessions over the years has been sighted. So I've taught hundreds of people who are sighted how to produce chocolate and how to make various ganaches and all that sort of stuff. So if you had to ask me as a young kid, I'd be teaching people how to cook, I would have got no chance. I've gone to the Ekka show here in Brisbane, which is like the Royal Show in Sydney, at the major pavilions there, and been amongst some of the major chefs doing chocolate cooking classes. And again, if you had said to me I'll be doing that, I would have gone, no chance in hell. But here I am. I have the Chocolate Moments in Brisbane and Graceful Moments in Graceful, and those two cafes. Not only serving, obviously manufacture. I make the chocolate for the cafes, but also we do this, the savouries, the coffee, the whole works.
So, how did you get your start doing that, and what made you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
It was actually about sport, and that was purely because when I was traveling overseas. For any person who's blind or has low vision, if you're going around looking for a gift for a person, just to thank them for their efforts of being part of the team as a guide runner or as a support person, it was very difficult to pick up a T-shirt or a statue or any sort of memento. Chocolate was always an easy go-to thing, and also a great way to get through customs internationally, just to clear it and walk through the zone. Yeah. And I developed an awareness and taste of chocolate over those years. I became well aware of, obviously, the different changes in chocolate, whether it be from the UK through to Europe, through the US, through to very parts of the world. And opportunity came up, and I just sort of fell into it in some respects, and was taught by some of the best chocolatiers in Australia, and still always learning. There's never not going to be a learning session I come away from where it be about different flavors. And I think if you look at Vision Australia, for example, the ingredients in a chocolate, like I can change around the ingredients of a chocolate, whether it be I don't have a recipe as such. For example, there's going to be some days where strawberries at the height of the season are stronger, and there's going to be at times towards the end of the season where strawberries are going to be less in strength. So at the beginning of the season, I might need 200 grams of strawberries. At the end of the season, I might need 450 grams of strawberries. Those ingredients or that recipe is always going to change depending on the actual environment at the moment. It's the same for a person who's blind or has low vision. We have to use, obviously, those other senses. It's not just one sense, where it be our hearing, as in that one recipe that's going to serve every single purpose. There's going to be other things which serve our purpose, to whether it be from an ability perspective, whether it be from a job perspective, whether it be from a sport perspective. There's always going to be those diverse ingredients that make things successful. And I think that for me as a chocolatier, I've used those recipes, whether it be, for example, if I produce a passion fruit and mango chocolate, there's going to be some days where I'll actually make the mango a bit stronger than the passion fruit, or vice versa, because I'll change up the flavors for our customers, because customers like change. And one thing that's certain in life is that change is constant, growth is optional. If you look at right now, where let's look at something, I suppose, political. If you look at the change in nature of people going to a cashless society, right now, for a person who's blind and has low vision, the challenge of going into any number of retailers where there's no keypads on the screen. So you actually have to tell the person your PIN number if the transaction's over a certain amount. Yeah. Because the screens are dead flat. So there's going to be, whilst we have change in technology, that would be the audio stuff, then you get the challenges of all these dead flat screens. So a person now is presenting a person with their private information.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly the point, that there is, there isn't always change for the better, that's for sure. There's these instances where, as somebody who's lived their whole life blind, you would have found many different ways to adjust to a many number of different situations.
Oh, look, and you look at even, for example, like
trial and
lifts,
error sort of thing.
yeah, when you look at lifts these days, sometimes now you have to go into a major building, you actually have to bid for a lift. It's a dead flat screen. You have to bid for the actual lift in a major, large building. So
Yeah.
whilst there's been change for good, and it's the same with obviously our customers. It's about making those changes where we can meet the needs of those customers, whether it be from a taste perspective, whether it be from a price perspective, or whether it be from I suppose, a range of diets, whether it be lactose intolerance, or whether it be gluten intolerance, or whether it be vegans. All those changes in people with dietary natures, we have to change to. It's the same, obviously, in our words, where we have to change up our ingredients and how we work through our lives. And finding various pieces of technology of support or tricks of the trade, which are going to enable us to become independent and mobile.
Yeah, so you're doing your business, and then somebody approaches you in the pool, and then you're working towards going into triathlon. Obviously, you excelled at that as well, went on to represent your country. Was the experience a bit different now that you're a little bit older? Was it a little bit different?
I think it was different in the sense of that different sports brings to it different athletes, and different athletes have different makeups and their own various motivations within the sport. And triathlon is a very different breed in the sense of the athletes who make up that particular sport, because they're so focused, because I think they have the intensity of having 3 disciplines within the actual sport. And also, triathlon is a very expensive sport, because not only the cost of the bikes, but also the maintenance of the bike, and then you've obviously the running and swimming, all those costs associated, whether it be through coaching or access to pools or access to, you've got the running shoes, you've got the helmets, you've got the tri-suits, you've got all the latest gear that goes along with it, the power meters on the bikes and all that sort of stuff. So there's a whole range of costs associated with it. For me, it was about developing that team. And that was a very tough team to develop, because you need your day in, day out training facilities, as in you guys who are prepared to jump on the front of a tandem bike, or see whether it be guide runners from running perspective, whether it be from swimming partners. So developing that team or that network of athletes was a major effort in its own right to compete in the triathlon.
Yeah, definitely. And look, we're going to come on to now your attempt of the English Channel, where we're 22 days out from
26.
26. My apologies. 26
That's
days out from attempting that monumental feat. How did you pick your team for this one? Tell us a little bit about your team.
My team is, I have 4 girls, 2 guys. They're very accomplished swimmers in their own right. Not Olympic representatives, but very strong swimmers, and all have good ocean, open water backgrounds. And it wasn't about picking my team as such. I didn't go out there and advertise. It was about sort of working within the various swimming groups and swimming with those guys, and then developing those relationships, those networks.
Yeah.
So, for example, one of them, my swim guides, is not only she's our swim guide, but also she's our team doctor.
Yeah.
And they're all from very different walks of life. But I think what's really great about the team is the culture, is the communication within the team, and the support for one another, because they know that, like, ocean swimming is a tough gig, because not only is it the cold, and we're talking seriously cold water, where I was telling someone a couple of days ago that swimming in Nogger Dam, it was 8 degrees air temperature. The water temperature was about 14, but when your hands came out of the water, it felt like you're swimming with a wrist, because your hands and your legs, your hands and your feet were that numb, you actually couldn't feel them. And even on the weekend when we were swimming down at Shelley Beach, in Manly, the water temperature was there about sort of 15, but again, the air temperature was about sort of 8 or 9. So you certainly have the challenges of the cold, but also B, the jellyfish, the stings, whether it be from any part of the sea life there. And also the challenges, obviously, of the salt water, the waves. It was pretty intense and choppy weather on the weekend. So, it's not as easy as sort of going out for an easy run along the road. It comes with it. It's sort of inbuilt challenges of the environment, and Mother Nature is a crazy thing. And the swim tethers that we use, I've designed, and I provide to a lot of athletes. It provides, again, consistent, reliable communication. It's just a tether which goes around both the waist and also the thigh, and the actual the cord that goes from the thigh to the other person's thigh is elasticated, so it provides good feedback, not too residual, not too resistant, but strong enough to keep them, I suppose, together.
And how much does trust come into this with when you've got a guide assisting you on something that's such a huge task? Like,
Trust is a very immense thing, but I think people's take on trust is, I walk into a relationship with a person, and I suppose, always have to have complete trust. I don't walk in there with, I'm going to start at 5% and build my way up to 100%. I have to go in there with 100%. And it's funny, Jordan, that there was often a point when I was running that it's always about the sixth or seventh run with a new guide runner that some form of accident would happen, because the first 4 times, for example, they were very particular and they were very emphatic about how they guided, and it sort of got to a point where probably the 7th run where they sort of became so comfortable that they forgot that you were blind or had low vision. So they forgot about a low-hanging branch or a step or something. So there was always an accident around sort of run 7. But with the trust in my team, it's always going in there with 100%. Because if you don't go in with 100%, then something ultimately is not going to happen. Also, you're not going to develop that relationship with that person, whether it be on the front of the bike or as a guide runner or as a swim guide.
yeah. We've got a question from Haiti. Wants to know, how has being blind contributed to your choices and the lessons you've learned along the way?
I think for me, I've tried to ignore or put to one side that I was blind, totally blind. And I think for me it was about, okay, well, let's look at the event, let's look at the opportunity, and let's look at obviously what I can use to achieve that particular challenge. Being totally blind, for example, would be on Everest, to be able to have $5 yak bell through to it could have been the air conditioning units or the vents on Dancing with the Stars where they were on the actual dance floor. So my choices haven't been impacted by my blindness. It was more about, okay, what things can we work around that? And I've never had I suppose, a bucket list as such. The actual choices have been about what was presented to me. So for me now, obviously moving forward after the English Channel, it's what's around the next point. And for me, whether it be as a chocolatier or organising, like I have a dream to hold some major events and lead up to 2032, and we'll see where that leads to. So it's, I suppose it's a passion for life, and I have a very strong philosophy, and that is that success is a journey and never ever a destination.
Yeah, very well said. Touching on that as well, because I've obviously had the opportunity to speak to quite a few people taking on some amazing tasks at this particular point in time. But what often doesn't get unsaid or often doesn't get mentioned is your loved ones sitting at home concerning themselves. How are your loved ones dealing with some of these tasks that you're taking on that can be quite dangerous?
Yeah, they've always, I suppose, recognised the risk, I suppose, I've taken, whether it be even jumping on the front of a tandem bike and screaming down Mount Cootha here in Brisbane on a tandem bike at 97k an hour. The day-to-day fear, but I think in any part of our lives there's going to be, I suppose, risk we have to take, and I think that's my family, my friends recognise that I'm out there giving, I suppose, everything a go. It could be, for example, in the ocean, it could be a bull shark, or it could be whatever it may be out there in the ocean, and there are plenty of them around. But yeah, I suppose I'm living life to what I see as a major opportunity, and I'd rather go out and know that I've given it everything I have than being fearful. And I could very easily sit at home and thinking, well, God, my guide runner's going to run me into a half-open door or a post or a pole. Yeah. But for me, it's about, okay, well, listen, let's trust my guide runners. Let's give it a go. And I think that's why they call it, rest in peace. When you die, you can rest when you die. For me, it's about giving everything a go.
So how long are you anticipating your swim across the channel is going to be? Like how many
I,
days are you thinking?
I'm thinking that's going to take me about 18 hours.
18 hours, okay.
Yeah, so it's about a 45K swim. You don't swim in a straight line because of the tides. You swim in like an S shape
Yeah.
because you push to the right and then back to the left with the actual incoming tides. And 18, I suppose, hours at a max. I'm looking to go quicker, but that's just sort of there's no pressures of I must be there at a certain time. It's about just getting across where it be, and no open water swimmer, or every open water swimmer, sorry, knows that you could be the world's best, but it comes down to the tides, and you're simply in the hands of Mother Nature.
Yeah. And you touched on as well that, it gets broken up often into 4 segments. Is there
Yes,
a particular segment that's a problem area that you're thinking
it's
on?
it's a third quadrant because that's where obviously a person might start to fatigue and you'll get pushed back to the right. The first quadrant, you really have to go for it. You really have to make as much ground as you can across the actual channel. Otherwise, getting to the second quadrant, you could be pushed too far to the left and miss obviously the ultimate goal of getting to the other side. So there's going to be a point where you've either gone too far to the left or too far to the right to actually have any chance of actually crossing the channel. Because the further east or west you go, the wider the actual swim is going to be.
Yeah.
The actual total width of the English Channel is 250 kilometres at its narrowest point. It's about 35K, but you swim approximately 45K. So if you get pushed left or right, you're potentially obviously looking at a 250-kilometre swim, which no one can do.
Yeah. 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 So with this taking place, 26 days, where can our listeners sort of follow your progress with this? I'm sure they're going to want to know how it
Yeah.
goes.
Yep. So, Great Dreams is the charity we're supporting. We're looking to raise just on 300 grand for young kids, supported by Great Dreams. And there's a couple of Paralympic athletes or young kids coming through who Lord Rowan, who is he's totally blind. He was injured in a motorcycle accident. He's 11 years of age and he's looking to do distance running. I got Josh, who's looking to do blind golf. There's a number of able-bodied athletes. So either through the Great Dreams Foundation or through our, I suppose, website or gerrardgosens.com.au, they can log on there and see the updates and the documentary. We're producing a documentary on the swim, which is called Changing Channels. And that documentary is about the actual team. It's not about Gerrard Gosens. It's about the team that's been on this journey for the last 2 years and how we've actually both physically and mentally prepared for the actual event. So I think that's an important thing to recognise that it is a team and it takes a great team to make a great dream happen. And that's what it is about both Paralympic Games and swimming the channel.
Incredible. And what a really great cause. So I will share all of that information through to our listeners today at the completion of our webinar series, and we wish you so much luck. It's going to be one of those incredible things.
I think what also is amazing and is a great privilege is that on the 25th of July, in 10 days' time, I'm picking up the Australian flag from Paralympics Australia. We're then taking it to the UK. I'm swimming the Australian flag across the English Channel. I'm then presenting it to a Paralympic representative on the shores of France. And then coming back to France and delivering the Australian flag to the Australian team at the Athletes Village on the 22nd of August. So to have that part of history and to fly the flag for the Paralympic team, as it might be, and to cross the channel with the flag is going to be an incredible moment in its own right as well.
Incredible. I know I've said that a lot in this webinar, but it is incredible. So we're getting close to the completion of our webinar today, and as I said, we're so in your corner. We hope your swimming is incredible and it goes really all to plan. What's some of with our listeners, many of them would have come along with different things that they were hoping to gain or learn from this particular webinar. Is there any sort of message that you would like to portray to some of them looking to take on challenges in their own lives?
Yeah, I think fundamentally it's always going to be about the team. And for any part of our daily life, it'd be working with a service dog isn't a senile dog or a guide dog. That's teamwork. Going to the movies is going to be potentially about teamwork. You've got a person assisting you in a movie theatre. And I think for me, it's making sure that you have that team around you to work together to achieve whatever that goal might be. And secondly, obviously recognizing that there are I suppose what we call the facts of life, where things can and will go astray, and that is a guarantee. You'll feel like a cup of coffee. You'll go and boil the kettle. You'll put the coffee in the cup. You'll pour the water into the cup, and you go to the fridge, and there's no milk, and that's a fact of life. Where those tiniest of things will happen. I see so many people who will get caught up in the smallest of things that go wrong, where it's important to recognise that there is the big picture, and those facts of life will happen, and how we are resilient enough to grow from those opportunities, and whether it be understanding that, look, a guide runner is going to have a bad day. He's going to be distracted. He's going to be thinking about what's happening at work or in their family or what's for dinner, and they're going to miss a step or a low-hanging branch, or there's going to be a guide runner or a pilot of a bike who is sick or has another family commitment who can't go for a ride with you. They're facts of life, and how we then obviously work on to, for example, I have a static bike at home. So if a guide runner or a pilot of my bike calls up sick, I can just jump on the static bike and do my training session there, or have a treadmill, or have a Swiss ball. Swiss ball, $25, $30. You can do 100 different exercises with a Swiss ball. So it's finding those alternative answers to the facts of life.
Gerrard Gosens, it's been an absolute privilege to speak to you. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us, especially so close to what I'm sure is going to be a monumental achievement. So once again, Gerrard, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
I'll end the webinar there. I hope you all enjoyed it. And once again, a big thank you to our guest. And we will see you next Monday for our next guest, or next two guests, because we're joined by two people from San Francisco who yachted from San Francisco to Australia, both completely blind. So thank you once again for joining us today, and wish you a very good day.
Thank you.